I'll be your host and moderator for today's session, the topic of which is proactive security in a cloud-first world. This is a peer group conversation. We want to make it as interactive as possible. There are three key themes that we want to discuss today. And we hope, we'll be open sharing of ideas. While we are recording this, anything that we use, we will first take prior permission from you before we attribute any quote or publish anything with you. Our intent is that at the end of today, send you a link to the recording so you get to watch it as well. In case you want to use certain sections of it, we are happy to support you there. There are three key themes that we want to cover today. One is about boards and their involvement in cybersecurity. Second is how do you secure your assets while leveraging cloud? And third is how do you build a more proactive attack surface management plan? The format, as I mentioned, is highly open and interactive. We have established 4 provocators, as I would like to call them, which is we have Ketan Samani, who is based in Taipei, and Ketan is the Group Chief Digital Officer with China Development Financial. We have Abid Adam, Group Chief Risk and Compliance Officer with Axiata, a regional telco with presence in over 6 markets directly and several other countries as well. We have Ian Lowe, Chief Technology Officer with any digital NTUC enterprise, part of NTUC enterprise. And we have Leonard, who will kick off today and will with some of the research that Palo Alto Networks has published together with MIT. I quickly want to introduce some of the other participants. Time is short, so I will just read out their names. We have Benjamin here, who is based in Singapore, who joined us. Welcome, Benjamin. Welcome, Haris Aziz from Johor Land, Khadir Fayaz from CB Richard Ellis, Daniel Ang, Dr. Daniel Ang from Kunan Group, Nirupam, who is from the Energy Research Institute, NTU, Prasanna Lohar, Chief Information and Security Officer with DCB Bank, Puneet Kaur Kohli, Chief Technology Officer, Rupesh Buran from Sony Electronics, Soma Mukherjee, Sivaruban Balachandran from DG, as well as Varun Kakkar. So a very warm welcome to all of you. And so the format is simple. We kickstart with Leonard. We'll talk for a few minutes. Then we get deep dive into 3 specific questions, which I'll let the provocators open the dialogue for each of the questions, and then following which I'll invite the rest of you to comment and have a discussion. So with that, welcome, Leonard. Over to you to set the stage from some of the latest research that was done together with MIT.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen here. Everyone can see my screen? Yes? Yes? Wonderful. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Manoj, and thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today. Essentially, I'm going to move along quite briskly because I want to leave the time for more of the discussion here. What we did was, with Palo Alto Networks, we worked with MIT Technology to undertake this piece of research, looking into the effects of the flow-on, if you want, from fast-paced digital transformation efforts. Aside from this great opportunity in terms of extending and creating new business, we wanted to particularly look at what is it meant for cybersecurity. So this piece of research really sought to get insights into what organizations are doing to understand and counter such new cyber threats, albeit some old ones that have been reinvented. So what we have here is some of the highlights of that piece of research. And what was encouraging for me, as you can see on the screen, was the response. We had a wonderfully high level of response from a lot of the senior leadership levels, but it was across industry sectors and equally geographically dispersed. So it was a real rich, diverse range of respondents, which to me makes the results even more enlightening. So there were 4 main highlights, if you want, when it came to the actual findings out of this research, starting with that business itself seems is no stranger to cyber attacks. In particular, what the research surfaced is that 51% of the respondents indicated that they had either experienced or expected a cyber attack on an unknown or unmanaged asset in that sense. Rather sobering when you start looking at the percentages there. Secondly, one of the main or primary reasons used to leverage these attacks has been this massive shift, in particular with work from home. And therefore, we were just talking about some of these benefits. Well, it's offset, I suppose, by a little bit more of a less secure environment that we've adopted at home. Prior to the pandemic, we had something like about 4% of the population worked from home. Now, recent polls indicate that post-pandemic, a lot of organizations, around 82%, intend on maintaining some amount of permanent work from home posture. So for security professionals, the work from home environment has expanded the attack surface, making it challenging to protect. And of course, we've seen the increase from the bad guys around phishing, ransomware, etc. RDP actually, in this piece of research, is quite enlightening, is now today's top technology, not just for connecting remote systems, etc., but it also now presents a huge attack vector for all sorts of these cyber criminals. And we're not just talking about ransomware gangs here, okay? In particular focus, these cybercrime groups have specialized in scanning the internet for these RTP endpoints to carry out a whole host of attacks, brute force attacks, etc. Excuse me. So today, I do believe that what we're encountering here is an exposure around, say, systems that use weak username, password combinations, essentially coming to light here. Ironically, a lot of this is now transcended into almost like a stock exchange type scenario. If you could actually leverage this scenario using the stock exchange model, this would be a well-traded public stock and would be very, very expensive RDP credentials. What I'm encouraged here is that our Expanse product, I'm told, is now finding somewhere around 3.4 million RDP exposures per day. I mean, that's encouraging from our capability, but it's also kind of scary when we actually understand what that means from an exposure perspective. The third interesting finding is that the pace of cloud adoption is not slowing. And nearly half of the respondents in the report indicated that more than 50% of their digital assets will be in the cloud in 2021 and then growing beyond that. So while the cloud provides a lot of wonderful flexibility, easy to grow, easy to span out and so forth, it does also create quite a significant security challenge. And lastly, the majority of the respondents actually indicate that their boards will be demanding some kind of attack surface management plan as part of their security program. However, it is important to also understand that whilst ASM solutions need to be able to do not just that comprehensive discovery, but it also needs to be able to prioritize and remediate, or at least work in concert with an organization's remediation plan. And for me, this really ties back to this conversation that a lot of us have been having in cybersecurity about resilience. The first step really in terms of developing stronger cybersecurity posture and resilience is about discovery across the board with prioritization for remediation. And that's basically all I want to say in terms of the summary findings. I'm sure that many of you will have access to the report or have access to the report, and it is quite illuminating in a lot of ways. At this point, I'll throw back to Manoj and hopefully open up for some robust discussion. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, Leonard, and appreciate you setting the scene. Clearly, that 50% of digital assets in the cloud is in 2021 clearly represents such a huge shift that people are moving on to the cloud. So thank you very much for setting the scene there. So maybe we start off with the first question, which is, we start first at the highest level with the board, and we'll be keen to hear. Maybe I would start with inviting maybe Ketan. Ketan, what, as the Chief Digital Officer, what is your expectation of the board with regards to cybersecurity? What level of involvement would you ideally like to have? Is it no involvement? What level of involvement is ideal?
Thank you, Manoj, and thank you, Leonard, for sharing such an insightful findings in the report. Really appreciate it. And let me share. Thank you for the question. Interestingly, in last 1 year I've been here, there's been multiple discussions, specifically when Taiwan was not in the pandemic lockdown in 2020. There was not a lot of discussion at that time when we arrived. But in May this year, as we went to level 3, and the BCP came in, remote working came in, and it came in a notice of 48 hours. So you can imagine the mad rush in trying to rationalize 10,000 people remotely, keeping the branch open as the government direction and regulation direction was given to us. And as a head office, we had to step up collectively to provide direction as well as a strategy. Information risk was at the highest order, given the rules and regulation for financial institutions, and the ability for the individual to do the job remotely where they had no practice to do so. And even basic things like we did not have secure connections from home. About a quarter of the population did not have computers or laptops given. It was desktop culture. So information risk was one of the highest in order, and threat visibility. So from the board perspective, it was clear discussion around what kind of threat are we looking at, what kind of loss are we looking at, what is the intelligence of what people are doing now. We were lucky enough that the process was seriously robust enough for us to know all the assets that are connecting to our systems, and the right cybersecurity software were clearly in place as we had annual audit on this. We were lucky for that. The board wanted to know the plan of monitoring, reporting, and a regulatory flexibility for working remotely for certain critical staff. And when you have a branch network open, how do we support branch network remotely, which was never thought of before? So I think I'm in a unique situation here, probably in the panel, where Taiwan had a very different scenario to compare to the rest of the world. We've come through with it, it's okay. But the business impact on us in terms of budget, recruiting more people, and we deployed cloud last year. So having right skill set across cloud security, acquiring those talents to manage that properly, all of those discussions are actually happening now as we go into 2022. So these are the key concerns from the board members to the technology colleagues as well as to compliance and regulatory colleagues.
Thank you, Ketan. Abid, let you speak a few minutes talking about the board and your expectations of the board, the level of involvement.
Sure, thanks, and hello to everyone. I mean, the way I look at it, largely the role of the board in most organizations evolves around at least three things universally, which is revenue, risk, and reputation. That's broadly speaking that the board really cares about, right? I'm not saying there are other things they don't care about, but just universally, I think revenue, risk, and reputation, the three R's that I think about. Now, if you take the three R's into context and specifically on, say, risk management, let's start there. No board today, even before COVID kicked in, wasn't aware of the opportunities and the threats that the cybersecurity and the digital landscape brings forward. So when the board thinks about that, they think about it from a risk perspective is what is the impact to my business? And I think some of that earlier on, it was touched upon by Ketan around what it means in terms of business operations. So when we engage the board, generally on the risk management is really understanding, and especially now with the COVID, where a lot of there is acceleration, digitization of the channels in which you service your products and capabilities, the board really want to ensure that those services are secure, because ultimately that will become the sort of the de facto point in which your customers are going to be engaging with the organization. So that risk has to be managed quite strongly. The second R, which I have mentioned from the 3 Rs, is around, let's say, the reputation. Now, if whether you are financial services or telco like our case, or most other businesses, where the uptime and availability, and you spoke about resiliency, is critical, then ensuring that those services are provided and ensuring that there is no downtime impact because of cybersecurity risks, whether it's DDoS attacks, whether it's ransomware that could bring down your network and then you have to clean up and bring these things up, is critical. So again, the board wants to understand what would be the impact from a business operation should there be a ransomware attack. And I think this will even get, in my view, a lot more airtime going forward as more and more all the businesses start digitizing and more consumer depends on the uptime and availability of your business. And last but not least, obviously, when it comes to revenue, and obviously the question always comes in around the cost, how much does it cost? How much do we spend? Is the spend proportional or in relation to the risk we face? I think that part always is a challenging part for most CISOs, simply because the impact of the event occurring is almost like a black swan event. It's like a huge to the organization. However, obviously the frequency and likelihood is always debatable, and depending on the maturity of the organization, risk management practices and so forth, that conversation goes around quite a lot. But generally, I think more mature boards understand, and engaging the board members, they understand that they have to invest. It's really around how the CISOs then position the narrative with the board and explain where you are, what are the risks you're facing, what's the tech landscape, and be able to have that conversation in terms of risk appetite. So I think I'll pause here, but generally the 3 R's, the risk, reputation, and revenue, those are things the board manages and worries about. And if the CISOs can and the risk management team members can sort of pivot their conversations around there, I think you'll be generally okay with the board. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Abid. Maybe we take a poll just so that we get a general view of every participant here. And if we can have that poll question, please. So the poll question is, does your board have a cybersecurity representative today? Really, yes or no question. So if we can just take that quick poll, it just come up on the screen. Ian, you want to comment as people take this vote?
Well, yeah, I mean, in Singapore, we have a little bit of I would say a catalyst in the sense of SingHealth breach was the wake-up call for many boards across the country. And all the boards will start jumping on and start being awake and says, what do you have for cybersecurity? Where are we? So it's unfortunate, but sometimes it takes an incident to jog something. But that was the catalyst, I think, in Singapore, where we're one of the biggest public breach, and forced a lot of board to reconsider. In fact, post that situation, I think the demand for CISOs went up, because before that there were many companies without a CISO. So I think with that being one of the catalysts, but the other thing is there was also a huge recognition between all the companies here that they need to go digital to be viable. And going digital, a lot of them have brought in the large consultancies, which have actually told them that cybersecurity is a foundation of a digital transformation journey, because without that, the risk is amplified. So I think it's just at the the perfect storm at a certain point, where you have the rise of digital transformation, a few public breaches that has actually caused a lot of boards to sit up, to listen, to get themselves educated and ask the right questions. And I think it's just, we were there at the right place, right time, that had got a lot of things moving. And hence, I do see that most boards are not as naive around this area as they were in the past. A lot of them are a lot more educated, a lot more informed, and asking a lot more questions. And they're tracking, like Abid mentioned about the budget, right? We tried to follow guidance from, CSA in Singapore have given guidance between 10 to 12% of revenue and stuff like that. So we will start looking at are we meeting there? Are we under-investing, over-investing? And if we are, where do we prioritize? So I think we also have a fortunate situation where CSA is putting out guidance to the boards who now have some benchmark to follow and to track whether we're doing it right or not. So I guess at that point, we don't have to do much. There are external forces helping us in this journey.
Yeah, it's 10 to 12% of IT spend, not
IT spend. Sorry, yeah,
yeah, that would tend. Yeah, that's good. Can we have the results of the survey, please, Peter? If you can share the results, and would anybody like to comment, ask a question on this topic? Thanks, Daniel, for that chat. You are taking on the responsibility from a board perspective. That's good to know. Anybody wants to comment? Varun, yeah, please go ahead.
I agree with Abid's the 3 R's and Ian that the committee, the C-suite has to be aware and educated. And also to add was to have a cybersecurity or risk committee who will ensure that it is aligned to the company's risk appetite. So all the initiatives, all the risks are taken care. So this committee should be responsible to ensure that the budget is allocated and is spent properly based on the risk appetites and what the mitigation plans are. So risk committee or cybersecurity committee is very important or crucial role to be played in this planning strategy. So that's the only thing I wanted to add. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, so so we got 100% of people saying you have a cybersecurity representative with background. Is that really true in every organization today? That's Varun. You want to comment?
In my experience, no. 100% is great to see that the participants responding it as 100%. That's a massive improvement, I would say. But I still think that in terms of broad representation, it's still a long way to go. We are improving. The boards are definitely understanding that cyber risk is not a technology risk. It's a business risk that everybody needs to take care of, not just the technology folks. But for example, in our organization, we do not have a direct representation in the board at the moment, right? But we do have a representation at the risk committee level, which is a step, I would say, and it's an important step, right? So I guess it still differs, still have a long way to go, but I'm very, very happy actually to see that the participants saying it's 100% yes to this poll, which is surprising, but in a good way.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Manoj, if I may. Okay, I think the pandemic has brought so many different things to all organizations, and then most I would have to say for a CIO or for the head of digital like myself, because suddenly I'm right now sitting in the board as the cybersecurity representative, and before this we were seen as a cost center. Every time I go to the board to ask for money, and people will keep on asking us about that. But right now, what happened after the pandemic, the board itself recognized that the importance of cybersecurity, so much so that they set up a sub-board called a Board Audit Risk Committee. So this is a new one, and it's additional responsibility for me, but it's a recognition by the board of the importance. And I do agree with Varun. I don't think everybody is doing this, but more and more at least tagging along to that approach.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that comment. Excellent. I think we have covered this reasonably. One thing I must say, I'm just looking at the screen and I'm myself dismayed. We don't have any women representatives on this. Is that not a topic for discussion today? But it just occurred to me that how did we end up making this? Sorry, you were saying something. Is it Haris?
No, I just wanted to mention that we failed ESG.
Correct. Excellent. Let's move on to the next question. So, we covered the board briefly, and at least it set the context. But one of the things that Len talked about was the increased risk because of cloud. Clearly, cloud is the fabric which is enabling innovation at a frantic pace. But to also find that 76% of all breaches in some form or way are linked to the adoption of the cloud. So that clearly sets a huge challenge. So how do you manage this, increased risk because of cloud exposure? Maybe I'll start with Abid, and then we can take the poll, and then we can get some more comments. Abid?
Yeah, maybe I would like to start by first contextualizing before I can share my thoughts on how you manage the risk in the cloud. I think while many people reference cloud technology as being less secure, at least there's a perception around that, or it carries a greater risk. Personally, I simply don't think that is true or acceptable unless you are able to make direct or measured comparison between your existing environment and whichever cloud service you are doing. I think I just want to be clear about that. So I think there may be some room for misnomer. Now, of course, the evaluation will differ depending on a number of factors, whether you're looking at your preventative, detective, corrective controls, your governance and oversight processes, your resiliency and continuity capabilities. So looking at the defense in depth approach, and then of course, whichever counterparty you're entering into transaction with, that would depend on that basis. So I think I wanted to clarify that. But let's sort of park that aside. And then to answer your question specifically in relation to how do we think about managing cloud risk, I would like to position it in a sort of a multi-pronged approach. And I'll get to the technology because I know this is a size-to kind of a conversation. But before I go into the technology side of things, I think there are at least 4 or 5 angles you need to look at when you go on a cloud journey. And the first one I would recommend you look at is the legal side of things. And there again, if you're looking at from security requirements, you bake it into your contracting early enough, incorporate it as part of all of your security requirements so that it's defined in your legal agreements. Rather now, then after that, you have SLAs, NDAs, whatever you got. But start on the legal side because that's really at the early start of the cycle before you even start on a technical side. The second angle that you need to think about is the regulatory landscape. And this is quite evolving and fluid in most of the regions we operate. So I think adherence to laws and regulatory requirements is something else. That's the second part I would recommend. The third part, which I know it's always a favorite topic for a lot of the people, is the technical controls. And I would perhaps within the technical control at least give about 5 areas that you should look at, 5 to 6 areas. The building blocks I would want to think about it from a perspective is boundary controls, really understanding your security zones of controls and isolating your entry and exit points or your choke points. So I think that's sort of the first thing. The second part under the technical control that I would think about is obviously your access management. But one difference in cloud that I think it provides more than what the on-prem solutions were around coarse-grained, more granular system level authorization capabilities that I think you can start looking into. So that's the second one. The third one I would think about it is from the integrity services. Because you are dependent quite a bit on the cloud provider, you have to maintain high integrity systems and data throughput with the automated tracking, detection, and corrective controls. And I think that goes back to the old age, the CIA triad of any security, the integrity component of it. The fourth part is the cryptography. And I think that's underspoken and undermanaged, but I think it's critical, both the hashing, encryption, and most importantly, the key management. Because if that's not managed properly, you have a big issue. And I don't know how many organizations really understand the key management concept. The fifth part of it was auditing and monitoring services. And this comes critical when you get into an incident. So I think the auditing and monitoring capabilities is something you really need to make sure you tie it up. My last comment on the technical controls would be, I don't know how many people, when they are actually designing their architecture, they are designing with an intent that what would be the impact if I want to pull out? Because going in is easy. Very few think about pulling out. When you're pulling out, that's where you have huge issues. So I think that's the last part on technical controls that I would like to elaborate. The last part is the privacy. I feel that in a world of cloud computing, an area that can pose a major challenge for both the customers and the cloud providers alike is privacy. And the reason for that, I can give you a few, but one of the main reasons for that is because of disparate set of laws and regulations currently around privacy. And one of the biggest, thorniest issue in this is data residency. Because if your data is residing in 5 different locations and you have no control over it, or at least you haven't had that discussion in the early phases, I said, in legal agreements and so forth, you could end up in a bit of hot water. So I think I'll pause here, Manoj. You asked me how we managed it. I didn't go purely just technical, but I wanted to just paint a broad picture of what you need to think about when you enter into the cloud discussion. Thank you. Over to you.
Yeah, fabulous, detailed, step-by-step perspective. Thank you for that. Let's take a poll question. How confident are you that you and your partners have the right governance to support your security posture? 1 is not as confident, and 5 being very confident. So as you answer this question, I'll invite maybe Ian to talk, and later
sure.
Ketan, if you can comment as well.
Yeah, since Abid has talked about the administrative controls and stuff, being a CTO, let me talk a little bit about the technical challenges, right? This is what I live and breathe daily. One of the biggest challenge for me is, just to put it, cloud to me can be both public cloud and private cloud, right? Because we do run large private clouds within our data centers. So it's still cloud, it's still scalability and stuff like that. But one of the challenge I face is the rise of cloud native technologies. We are going to have a lot of new technologies popping up, and developers in the startup world or in the digital transformation world, we can never catch up with the speed developers adopt new technologies. So for example, when serverless came on, I have very enthusiastic people launching full serverless apps, and we have no controls for it. And even before that, when containers came up, and then when Kubernetes came up, and then when you got Fargate and these cloud runs, we are always playing catch up. And one of the challenge we have as people responsible for the security is, how do we actually keep up? And we can't say no. In a sense, when it's so competitive out there, especially when you talk about startup environments, we tend to have to find ways to mitigate some of these challenges, right? So when serverless came out, I had a nightmare, really a nightmare, because we couldn't put agents anymore, right? A lot more traditional defense are dead. Things we used to do, like AVs and things like that, don't work anymore because there is no host. Even in the on-prem private cloud, we have already abandoned virtual machines. They are deploying Kubernetes directly to the public cloud environment, like Nutanix AHVs and stuff like that. So as we move forward, I think one of the challenge we face is, how do we actually stay ahead of the game? How do we actually address that and recognize that these people are going to run, right? And they are going to start using new technologies. And how do we adapt ourselves? Do we move a bit back? So one of the things we've done is actually focus on shift left. Focus on securing the app, focus on securing the environment, focus on immutable instances, for example, no changing in production environments and stuff. But there are many little things we need to do, but it's just evolving every day. This is what I mean, that the challenge is not like we have this is the solution, let's do it. No, it's about, oh my God, this is the next new thing that's coming out of the box. And developers are going to rush to it. And they're going to tell the management, no, this will make you a lot of money if we can be the first to market. And, we are living in a new age where time to market trumps a lot of other concerns these days. And we really have to be not be seen as the no guy anymore, right? Security guys have this bad reputation as the no guy. We can't be the no guy all the time. We have to be a little bit more creative. I think the challenge is about the creativity and to have a lot more make use of a lot more tools in your arsenal to apply mitigation. We may not seem natural, but maybe a little bit out of band in that sense. So it's not a specific thing I want to talk about. It's more like the mindset. We need to be creative, we need to be partners, and we need to be really embracing this change and roll with it. I think that's my point on this.
Hey, thank you, Ian. Ketan, you want to quickly comment? It seems like people are reasonably confident on the right governance and posture. As a digital officer, you want to be at the edge of introducing new things. Is the security team challenging you? Is pushing back?
Yeah, there are two comments I'd love to make in Abid's as well as Ian's. I think if I do it in reverse, I think Ian made the right call. and very wonderful one round, cannot say no, need to do creativity. When I look at, for us, fintech over the last 5 to 7 years has been disrupting the industry, and yet a lot of things fintechs are able to do, even under regulations, which the incumbents are not, which is a massive question mark. With a low budget, with low investments, fintechs can achieve things which with a large budget, large team's capability, the incumbents are really struggling. So that's one area that puzzles me a lot as a consumer of this. I think the other thing Abid mentioned, talking about privacy, which was the last point he mentioned, which is really dear to my heart. I think being a customer-focused individual, I do at least 3 to 6 ethnographic research to see customer sentiments from the consumer businesses, and also look at B2B, the commercial side a lot. And almost everybody, and Taiwan, which was much interesting for me to learn, the 95% digital. So the population's understanding of digital tools and use is very high. The reason a lot of super apps are not launching in Taiwan is because Taiwanese do not believe in providing the personal information across a single platform that has multiple services. And that was a staggering thing for our survey very recently, last month, done by our consumer bank. We discovered this, to me, means that the industry is really not creative enough. If I look at Ian's point, how about, shifting the data, the consumer data, and the privacy choices in a plain language, no matter which language it is, in a plain language, and offer the privacy passport to the consumer. The consumer decides when they do digital consumption, doesn't matter what they've signed, but if they wanted to revoke the privacy component, it's in their control. They could troll through their privacy passport and remove the organizations automatically, through regulation. They have to delete the data. So if we get the consumer run things, then the organization burden of privacy, the regulation burden of privacy would reduce significantly within the industry, right? But consumers are willing. I'm talking about first world markets here. And in the third world markets, it's amazing that so much manipulation and hijacking of data is happening. So I think there are opportunities to be more creative and to reduce costs in the industry a lot. Those are my comments.
Great, thank you for that. Anybody wants to comment, ask a question, say something? Benjamin, you want to? Okay.
I think one of the things that I want to say regarding cloud is I have a different opinion with Abid in terms of it being perceived as less secure. In my personal experience, it has rather been perceived as more secure by default, which is where I guess one of the things that I've done is spending a lot of time explaining about shared responsibility when adopting cloud between the consumer and the provider. And I think a lot of these, I guess, breaches also can be potentially attributed to people not realizing that there is a lot of onus on the consumer itself to make sure that your applications and data within the cloud platforms, whether it's a SaaS-based solution, whether it's a public cloud, whether it's IaaS, PaaS, whatever it may be, there are a lot of things that you as a consumer need to do in order to be able to protect your data, which are exactly what were highlighted in terms of the technical measures. But in my personal experience, it has been a little bit of reverse scenario in explaining to the stakeholders that don't assume if you're going to cloud, it is by default secure. So that's what I wanted to highlight.
I think, if I may, over-reliance on the cloud providers is also another pitfall that people normally fall into. We had an occurrence, an incident in our organization whereby one of our administrators, not the users, the administrators' account was compromised for some reason. It was not a massive implications, but it caused downtime to our email system, and it happens on our Exchange accounts. So when Microsoft saw that there's one account was sending spam emails, so they blocked out the whole domain. So we had to work out reason with Microsoft, and then they found out it's actually somebody has gotten control of our admin, and it was contained quite quickly. But again, it did cause a downtime to our system, which involves processes, emails to the customers and whatever not. Yeah. So the point is we cannot be over reliant on the providers. I think we have to understand what they cover and what they don't cover, and make sure that all items are taken care of. I think that's quite important.
Excellent. Thank you. Abid, you want to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I think it was Varun, your comment. Actually,
Yeah.
I was trying to actually emphasize that same point, because the question or the notion generally is cloud is less secure. And that's why I was trying to give an evaluation around, I don't think. But of course, you can't make that a general statement, because there are many factors you have to consider when you are evaluating whether the cloud is more or less secure. And it's very organization specific. In fact, I strongly believe that most SMEs are better off using cloud when it comes to security. I mean, there are other things you need to think about, which I didn't go in this conversation, really around people think it's less costly. I don't think so. If you work out your long-term TCO, that's a whole different game, but I'm not getting into the finances at this point in time. And also the second point, I mean, I didn't touch, but definitely there are two factors one need to think about when you think about cloud. One is obviously your service model. And that service model, whether it's IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, will determine the type of security agreement and arrangement you'll get into. And then second is your deployment model. Because if it's a public cloud on your IaaS, is very different to your SaaS on the private cloud. So I think you guys just basically two elements of deployment models and your service model, and then your governance wrapped around that will also be a very critical factor to think about. Again, there are some common baselines, but I personally believe that each organization needs to do this evaluation, and based on the risk appetite, can have that conversation. So that's what I wanted to share. Manoj, over to you. Thank you.
Hey, thanks.
Thanks. Manoj, just before you say, it's interesting points that's come through between Varun and Abid, right? If I look at it from pure consumer perspective, again, as somebody who's got to make some strategic decision as well as agree on budgets on these things, cybersecurity always surfaces when we talk about cloud. From a technical perspective, the technology team are very, very good at articulating risks and rewards of it. And particularly the business who needs to be competitive, and speed to market is now becoming essential due to the escalation of digital across the competitive landscape. The benefits amplified is quite higher in terms of messaging, but the risks are not that much. So I think it's an educational process, which we haven't discussed in this forum yet. For the executives, really understanding the challenges of cloud to be done. Last month, CEO and myself interviewed all the presidents to understand their sort of digital quotient individually. Interestingly, out of the 5 presidents of different businesses, 4 of them said, we just switch off when you start talking anything technical. We don't understand it. Yet we're willing to give you money because we trust you. This is kind of dangerous, in my view. It's very dangerous. And I think it's incumbent on the industry to come up with a language that the business stakeholders understand it. Even if it's from a consumer perspective, it has to be done a lot more. And this we also found on the regulator side. So one of the major voices in the industry that is negative around cloud is the regulators. They keep saying this, saying that, they do more regulation, more audit. That causes an issue because the interface into the regulator is either lawyers, compliance, or CEOs, or the business heads. It's not the tech heads, mainly. They go to the forum. So that is another area that needs to be really addressed a lot more by the industry.
Excellent. Thank you, Ketan. Yeah, Soma, I think you wanted to comment.
Yeah, I think I think the gentleman already added most of the points, but one point I also wanted to add is that how are we looking into the people aspect? Because generally what we've seen with the digital transformation and cloud, the most of the issue is the change of thought process. So firstly, today we all can agree that cloud is kind of inevitable with the new technologies and all coming in. So how are we changing the thought process? And it also goes to the point that, at strategic decision, when we are starting the cloud journey or in the middle of the cloud journey, what are we doing to upscale the skill set of the people. So I'm just going to give an example that, the new technologies are coming in with, a lot of IoTs and AIs and all. How many in the cybersecurity world can really come up with whether the process or the technical controls for those which are mainly cloud enabled? And I'm talking about more of a futuristic perspective. Fine. I think right now we have kind of looked into most of the productivity, SaaS-based applications and all the identity and access piece. So have we changed the thought of moving from the network is the perimeter to more of an identity is the perimeter, because is everything open out there? So I think the other aspect is need to look into the people aspect from the board till the engineer level of changing the thought process and coming up with adopting or accepting cloud, and based on that, whether it's technical or process oriented or regulatory.
Thank you. I just want to add just a small little point. Back to Abid's point, it's about comparison where you are to what's, it's always about comparison, right? So I think what's missing here is the public sector view. So Benjamin can at least back me on this. Public sector people have a different view of the world. So when you come to an organization where the board members are ex-civil servants, ex-public sector, they have a very different view of the cloud was secure because they are used to being able to do security clearance of all the administrators, security clearance of every single hardware, security clearance of every single cable that goes in. So in the sense, it's like if you talk to one extreme, the SMEs is fantastic, but to the guys in the public sector, public sector background, let's say they were not even public sector, they were in the public sector maybe for 20 years and they come up to private sector, this is the baggage they carry. The loss of control, and that's the perception of reduced security. So I think it's important to also understand the management, the board levels on their background, because this is what I deal with a lot. You get ex-army generals who have a different view of someone else, right? So that is some baggage from their past experiences. I believe that's another dimension we need to be conscious of.
Rupesh, you want to comment?
Yeah, quickly, it has to be driven by business. But here I want to add is today cloud security providers are providing cloud adoption framework so that the customer can understand the requirements, designing. This is also a mental shift from the designing perspective that on-premises architecture is different than the cloud architecture. So using these frameworks will help the organization. And the second is using Cloud Security Alliance metrics, which is also a granular technical controls in place, which will help as a guide for the technology engineers to actually understand the risk and understand whether the controls are in place, if there is a gap, what is the workaround, and highlight the risk. So there are frameworks, there are guidelines. And then yes, a training is required and awareness is required, and it can from these discussions it can actually fix the gaps within the people or the management level or where we have to agree on. So there are frameworks, adoption frameworks from these cloud providers that can be very useful in these discussions.
Thank you. Balaji, a quick one. Yeah. Welcome.
Sure. Hi everybody, I'm Balaji here. So for me, a few points are very critical to take into account. One is balancing the cloud and the on-premise, because a lot of time we perceive it is one over the other. We should be prepared that it's a coexistence part, because cloud comes with its own advantages, but it means a lot to the developers or the technical community who are building it, how a change management works, how a lot of other operational activities work on a cloud is a little different. I think that's where this inputs from these different players could come into picture. The second is on the part of data, because though we all understand the benefits of the cloud, there is still a lot of concerns on what kind of data can I really put it in a cloud. Can I put my more confidential data in a cloud? Is it safe enough? A lot of information classification comes into the play, especially when you embark a cloud journey, which is very critical. This doesn't mean cloud is bad, because you have to go to the cloud for a simple reason, for a global scalability. Different cloud vendors are there. Your customers may be running on different clouds, right? It is not just your choice. It's your ecosystem which can make you to take a choice as well, right? So keep that into account.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Balaji. Let's move on to the final topic for today's conversation, which was attack surface management. So maybe I'll quickly start with inviting Ian to say, Ian, attack surface management, relatively a new concept. We want to just set the stage and for a conversation on this.
Sure. So attack surface management is something that popped up in recent years, although the concept is not new, it's just that it's more organized these days, right? So people are starting to worry about how they can get access to the organizations, right? In the past, people will just run vulnerability scans. They will just run because they have on-premise, they have one firewall, one entry point, one IP to come in and stuff. It was more simple. But people don't realize that attack surface could include many things. In fact, like you have IoT devices, can they be accessed? You have working from home, people like the RDP, VNCs, Telnet that people left on. We have seen situations where people, administrators working from home, just found it easier to enable remote access for them to do their job, unsanctioned, right? We also have a lot of supply chain. We've seen cases after cases of supply chain attack. That's an attack surface that people come into the organization. Email servers. Someone set up a rogue email servers to access rogue access points. All these, anywhere that people can come in. Now, this complexity is amplified, I would say, by cloud, mainly because anybody is procurement these days. Anybody with a credit card can procure services rather than through the traditional procurement process to buy a server, rack the server, mount. Just the ease of procuring makes it extremely painful, and also with concepts like auto-scaling and just-in-time, they can pop up and disappear. Like if you do a periodic scan, they might not be there. But because they spin up, they open an attack surface and they close down after a while, it's missing. So the idea is that we need to be more continuous about this monitoring. And I think that's something that keeps us awake at night. How do we monitor these unsanctioned things that go on around? And because of the short-lived time frame, can be as short as a few minutes, that could open a door and then a periodic scan will not catch it. So in my take, it's attack surface is just something pretty important these days, just because we are going to the realm of rapid expansion, rapid innovation, rapid creation of services, and also rapid destruction. Fail fast, but fail often, but fail fast. They might set up something unsecured for UAT testing that is totally open, and they shut down. Then I do a nightly scan, I don't see it. And these are to me, the big challenge of attack surface management.
Abid, you want to comment to this question? Proactive approach, develop internal capabilities, partner. Your surface is small, you don't need it now.
Yeah. I think we have evolved our approach a little bit differently. Allow me to just elaborate a little bit what I mean by that. My discussion with the board has been, I think we have to operate with a assume breach mindset. So that's really the thought process we're going in with. Now, when we think about assume breach mindset, the shift in our strategy for the next 3 years is really around we have ramped up our active offense capabilities. So we've built our own red team, blue team, and purple team. And the idea is, for me, is irrelevant whether you come from home, whether you come from internal network, whether you come from external attacks. It's irrelevant. What is relevant is what is it that is value to us as an organization. And we've defined our crown jewels. And in all the countries we operate, each CEO, not CIO, not the digital officer, not CTO, each CEO has to sign off, take it to its board risk committee, and then get it noted to the board that these are my set of crown jewels. Taking those crown jewels, I have an independent team, and their entire job every day is to go after those crown jewels. And we've got 24/7, 365 monitoring capability with complete different firewalls between the two. I mean, I'm talking about logical separation and physical, but basically these two teams are not the same teams. And their job is to monitor, detect, and respond. And we continuously evaluate, is the red team able to compromise the crown jewel? And if so, what was the attack method, the TTPs as they would call it? And we use the TTPs to evaluate what use cases we need to evolve in our monitoring center to ensure that next time that similar attack level or the simulation of that attack is being detected. Because I personally believe, and that's just my view, I'm happy to debate this out, that if you purely have a defensive posture and monitoring posture, the day you get attacked, I can assure you most of your teams will be unprepared, not knowing how to respond, simply because they haven't gone through that drill. And I'm not talking about desktop drill like crisis simulation or BCM exercise, and that's also important. I'm not saying that's not important, don't get me wrong, but I'm talking about really technical side of things. So I think that is the approach we are taking. And of course, I mean, we've just concluded when the COVID started, we concluded what we call a work from home assessment. So, it's really trying to compromise our employee and then trying to use that employee access to get into the critical crown jewels. How easy was it? What was the and we measure even the duration of the period, the effort, and all of those kind of things, because that will allow us to build some sort of resilience internally to ensure that we are able to keep up as much as possible our safeguards and ability to detect and respond. And we also measure, obviously, one side is the attack side, how quickly somebody can get in. The other side, we measure things like mean time to detect, mean time to respond. And that is some of that metrics that allows us to see how our teams and our capabilities are responding to the attacks. I'll pause here because there are other things you need to look at. We need to look at the threat modeling. Who are the attackers? What are the motives? Because if you get into a fight, example, I use a boxing analogy, is a very different preparation if you're going to fight Mike Tyson and Muhammad Ali versus somebody who's lightweight in your own category. So I think depending on who you're getting into the ring with, your preparation and your ability to respond needs to be very different. And I think that's the way we're thinking about it. So Manoj, I'll pause here. Over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you. Thank you for that. Daniel, I think you get the award for the most active chat participant and views there. Yeah? Thank you for that, Daniel. I don't know if it is driven by the compulsion of a poor audio quality or just your preference for that channel. But great summary, Abid. Any quick comments before I pass it to Len to summarize? Anybody else? Anybody wants to comment, take a feedback from Abid or Ian or Ketan?
Sure.
Yes, please, Rupesh. Yeah.
So attack surface management is not something new. It is there for so many years. Initially, it was on premises network, and now we are moving towards cloud. And the way he also mentioned a bit that the crown jewels. So, but as also Leonard started his presentation when known assets, unknown assets, and managed assets. That's where is actually the attack surface management, to understand where are my assets, what is my landscape. And out of that landscape comes the Abid's point of crown jewels, protecting them, monitoring them. I would like to add something which is in-house capability we developed, that today commercial tools are not available to perform. They can perform threat analysis, orchestration, and everything. On top, the missing part is the risk scoring available for all kinds of controls and risks. Because we have so many applications spread across organizations, regionally, globally, then the risk scoring will help to understand what controls were missing. The risk score goes up in the real time, and the CISO or the CEO or CDO can understand the actual risk on which applications has to be prioritized in his scope, so that when he goes to a meeting or there is some attack going on, he can actually see something on real time, the risk score based on all this analysis, and then he can make his decisions, which is much easier to grow on from a high level decision to a granular level inputs where the controls were missing, why the teams were not able to detect it, how much time response is required to recover from it. So maybe a risk scoring is something which is missing in the commercial tools, but we can have an internal team who can develop that into an automation and integrate it, and it can help the organization. Yeah.
Thank you, Rupesh.
We're running out of time, but if I could just add one point, this asset management, because without sounding too controversial, any organization, to be open with you, if you are, I've been through this pain, that's why I'm just sharing with you. If your organization is large and has legacy environment, and if you are trying to get a proper control of your total inventory. Good luck to you. And if you get it right, please come and help me understand how you got it right. That's just my open and honest opinion here. So that is why we changed the whole modus operandi to state, okay, if you're going to try and keep it accurate, relevant, and get everything right, the project is never going to end anyway. So why don't you just flip it around, start with what is absolutely non-negotiable? What systems, applications, databases in our asset management ecosystem are absolutely lifeblood of the organization? And then work around what are the touch points on that, what are the interfaces, who are the people, who are the supply chain partners, because your ecosystem then is very neatly, at least, I would say, packaged to understand what problem you are dealing with. Of course, over a period of time, once you have kind of built an organizational processes and appetite and capabilities, you then can extend that surface level to go outer and outer layer. So I think I'll pause here, but might just caution on asset management. If anybody tries and say, well, I need to have a proper inventory and then I can do my surface layer, good luck. Like I said, if you get it right, please help me out how you've done it.
Okay, fabulous. Yeah.
So I've been saying back to my point, right? With the new ever expansion and destruction of assets, you're never going to get a inventory maybe at just a moment in time, right? So it's chasing after like smoke in a sense. But one of the things to note is that again, different organizations obviously have different crown jewels and different attacks. So my previous life, prior to this, I was leading the government cybersecurity operations. So as you can imagine, state-sponsored attackers are very different from commercial attackers. And the way, the amount of money we spend, it's proportionally different, right? Basically, in the commercial world, you want to close the case, move on, because this investigation hampers you from making money, right? It's just close the door and go on. But in government world, they would like to know exactly who did it, why they did it, when they did it, and are they part of the investigation goes much deeper and longer. So the time spent tracing and categorizing and looking at history of when things are open and closed, it's a lot more important. So I mean, just to add that it's not uniform across all our industries. We have financials, we have manufacturing, we have real estate. I'm in a conglomerate. I have 9 different businesses, and they're all very different, from insurance, which is financials, to supermarkets, and retail. We try to have a more measured approach in terms of how do we adjust the spend to be just nice. And you're never going to get it right because we're never going to have enough money, but we have to prioritize and make that risk decision and just go with like I said, we go with a risk-driven, threat intel-driven defense in some cases. And also we put the money where we think the next wave is coming from. And then one of the things that help us is intel, right? Intel is very important because without intel, we cannot cover every stock. That's just that we will never have enough money to do it.
If I could just add, Manoj's last point. I think as an industry, we have to think about upstream and downstream risk and impacts. I use Ian's example right now. Let's say your government. For a government institution to get compromised, there's a value chain that the attacker has to go through. Let's say a telco, right? So the way because we see activity even when there's geopolitical tensions between East and West. Some of the countries are used as proxy in between the two firing lines, right? So it depends again on what, if you are critical national infrastructure, sometimes you are just a proxy to the two attack surfaces from attack A and attack B. And it is critical that when you're doing your risk assessment, you have to look that into consideration. And I already mentioned about Ian's point of view, who are your attackers? Because sometimes your attackers are, let's say if it's a nation state that's after another nation state, but it so happens that they find out that you are the carrier of that organization or department that they are after. Whether you like it or not, you are collateral damage in the process. And so it's really important then for you, when you're doing your risk assessment, to identify these stakeholders and then engage the relevant parties so you can build a collective defense capabilities. I'll pause here, Manoj, but I think
thank you very much, Abid. Thank you. I know I realized we should definitely plan for more time, but this is engaging. This was great. Firstly, thank you. But I should first pass it to Len to quickly summarize. He's been a patient listener. He didn't get a chance to speak, but I'll let you at least summarize, Len.
No, it's not a problem, Manoj. Look, I just want to put the final sort of takeaway screens up there. I share the same comments that a lot of you espoused there, and in particular, the lack of time. This has absolutely been one of the most enthralling discussions, and we surfaced a whole myriad of challenges that no doubt impact on how we practice cybersecurity. I made a couple of notes here of some of the really salient points here. There's commentary about understanding information risks, getting visibility. From the board, we're talking about the concern around do we have adequate monitoring and monitoring requirements? How do they support a fragmented workforce? What's the impact on the revenue, risks, reputation? Are services secure? The fact that there's a lot of comment that they are open to spend or, let's say, invest, but on what points do they see expenditures being critical aspects? And then there's a whole issue of, okay, if they just give money, is there the scenario of abdication of responsibility and accountability? Other comments that were really interesting. Never waste a good incident. I can empathize with that. I think that was Ian who brought that up. That is so true. They present great opportunities. Also on that, what Abid said there, IR incidents are also, to me, the greatest opportunity to learn. They're great nuggets of gold, like we're talking about using the results from red teams, blue teams, that sort of stuff. Incidents are just a natural opportunity for lessons learned there. Shifting cybersecurity, making it an enabler, no longer part of this Department of No. And the whole area around cloud, discussion. I think there's an interesting tension there about security versus risk. And I think we could probably unpack that conversation even further. Separation of duties, understanding who's responsible for what. And I think that we started to get there, but that the challenge with incidents in the cloud versus exposures, incidents that are actively associated with compromise versus exposures that are misconfigurations. We've seen S3 bucket data leaks that are due to exposures, not necessarily physical or at launch attacks, right? I love Ian's comment about cloud amplifies complexity. That is so true, 100%. And the last two things that we throw into the mix, and they're all topics on their own right, okay? Regulation and legislation are major challenges. I'm glad someone said that. I actually have a law degree, and I find I look at all the different regulation that we're subjected to in terms of cybersecurity now. The gold standard, let's say, for argument's sake, GDPR, but then every country now has a form of data breach regulation. And then we look at the data laws that are proliferating. I think last month, China brought in their data security laws with all its sovereign requirements, And then that last bit, talent. We are all struggling with the talent challenge, digital as well as cyber skills are in short supply, which is why I would advocate all of you, find a way to support those educational institutions that gave you this great opportunity. Look at where you've been able to land and achieve. Look back and help some of those institutions, and in doing so, we're helping ourselves. So finally, yes, we got all those key takeaways, and all those things kind of fall under, in some way, shape, or form, those three main headlines there. And for myself, I'm encouraged from the fact that I'm with an organization that is vested in the mission, and the mission correlates to what we've been talking about here. And the bottom line for me is that as an organization, it's wonderful to be trusted as an entity to help you all on your mission and secure your cloud and secure your security operations. Great to be known as a standard. So with that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much. I've certainly found some great brothers in arms here. I'm absolutely going to hit a few up after this just to stay in touch, because I love some of the conversation that has ensued this afternoon. Thank you. Back to you, Manoj.
Thank you very much, Ian. Firstly, a big thank you to our provocators, our conversation leaders, Ian and Abid, and Ketan had to leave, but you guys really were so generous with everything you learned and shared with the rest of us. And to all the other participants for joining in, sharing, and the objective is to bring together a peer group on a regular basis who can share openly, who can learn from each other. So we hope to continue this endeavor. We will summarize the entire findings for you, send it back to you within a couple of days. We hope to make some nuggets of videos from the, some of the really highlights that were mentioned, and we'll share that with a broader audience as well. If there is anything that we can do to support you, Twimbit is an open source research platform. You would like to put some research out there, you want to write some of your content, we and our support team can help you do all of that. So we are out here, share with us what you would like to do, and we are fully here to work together with you to help, creating more knowledge and sharing this knowledge in a meaningful manner. Enjoy your lunch. Thank you for staying back, even though we, I think, overstepped by approximately 15 minutes. So appreciate each of your time and for your generous participation. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Manoj.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.